Good afternoon, all, and welcome to the Focused Deterrence Strategies to Address Violence in Madison, Wisconsin, DGA NTTAC webinar. All phone lines are on mute mode. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will address it at the end of the webinar. I'm now going to introduce our presenter, Captain Cory Nelson. Cory is currently in his 29th year of employment with the Madison, Wisconsin Police Department and serves as captain of the West District, the largest district in the city. He began his career in patrol for 9 years in a variety of positions. He then went on to serve as a narcotics and violent crime detective for 14 years. As a lieutenant, he was the officer in charge of 3rd Detail for the city, and then went on to become commander of the Professional Standards and Internal Affairs Unit. He was then assigned to the Investigative Services Unit and served as the Assistant Team Commander for the SWAT team. He is currently serving as a scholar in the Law Enforcement Advancing Data and Science, also known as the LEADS program, through the National Institute of Justice. There are 10 officers each year across the country selected to take part in this 3-year program, which involves participating in various national law enforcement-related discussions. Cory and his supervisor at the time were responsible for bringing the concept of focused deterrence to the Special Investigations Unit in the Madison Police Department. He served as a detective in the unit when it began, and then later went on to be the unit supervisor. He spent time in High Point, North Carolina, studying their model and conferring with subject matter experts, who then helped develop the model used in Madison. He also more recently spent time with Chula Vista, California, observing their focused deterrence program. Cory believes that the concept of focused deterrence can be expanded to fit a variety of needs depending on department priorities. And with that, I just want to thank Captain Nelson for being with us today to share his information. And Cory, the webinar is yours.
Thank you very much, Provi. I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate everyone taking time on their busy day to listen to this. Couple of things. I'm not an academic. I do not have an academic background. I don't have a research background. So what you're going to hear today are my frank opinions about focused deterrence and how we made it work here in Madison. So to start out with, we are the capital city of Wisconsin. Just for those of you who don't know much about Madison, we have approximately 250,000 people here in the city, and in the surrounding communities outside, there's approximately 500,000 people. We are the 2nd largest county in the state. As far as demographics go, we are predominantly white. We are 78% white, approximately 7% African American, 7% Hispanic, and 8% Asian. We do have significant racial disparity issues here in our city. I believe back in 2015, it was reported that 75% of the African American children in our community live in poverty, compared to 5% of the white children. And approximately 50% of the African American children do not graduate on time here, compared to 16% of whites. Couple of pictures of the city just for you to see. You will notice on the left that is in fact ice fishing, for those of you who don't know anything about ice fishing, but believe it or not, people do sit on the ice in the winter and fish because there's little to do here in the winter. Our winters are long. They go from November till about April, when our lakes are covered in ice. Snowmobiling, skiing, ice skating are popular winter sports, and everything water related in the summer, biking, running, boating, again, fishing. And the Packers and the Badgers, we are the home city to the University of Wisconsin, so the Badgers are a big deal, as well as the Green Bay Packers. So back in 2010, Chief Noble Ray was our chief at the time. I'm sure some of you know him. He's a fantastic guy that went on to prosper in retirement. He asked Tom Woodmansee, is probably another name you'll recognize, who was big on the focused deterrence front. Tom was my supervisor at the time. I was on light duty due to a hip replacement I had, so I had some free time on my hand. So we asked Tom and I to look at some kind of proactive unit to combat an increase in violence that we were seeing in Madison about that time. So Tom and I did look around the country at different programs. We did settle kind of on what High Point was doing at the time. with focused deterrence. So we both ended up going to High Point. Tom went a little earlier than I did, but I do give Chief Ray credit in the fact that he was fully supportive of going out on a limb and trying something new. So again, another name to recognize, David Kennedy. I'm sure that name is not unfamiliar to most of you. I think he's considered the father of focused deterrence. As we were starting this program, we all read the book, and I would highly recommend his book. It's a quick read, it's a good read, and it really gives you a better understanding of what focused deterrence is all about. It kind of gives you an understanding of what's tried and what's worked in other communities around the country. Highly recommend the book. So as we were starting our program, we were fortunate to be blessed with an embarrassment of policing research riches here in Madison. Professor Herman Goldstein, who I hope most of you know, lives here in Madison, so we are lucky to have him here. He is a resource that we do use as often as we can. Professor Mike Scott was living here in Madison at the time, and they were running the problem-oriented policing group out of the University of Madison. I believe Professor Scott has moved that down to Arizona, where he is recently located. But we were lucky at the time to have them to kind of pick their brains. We were in contact with them a lot. We had a number of meetings with them on what might work, what might not work. We brought in Professor Kennedy to kind of look at what we were doing and give us ideas. And then, as I mentioned, Tom and I had went down to High Point, where we had trained under Chief Marty Sumner, Dr. Lee Hunt. I believe Dr. Lee Hunt has moved on to Greensboro currently. However, at the time, he was heavily involved in the focused deterrence efforts there. And then Reverend Jim Sumney, who I'm going to talk more about later. So what is it? For those of you who don't know, it's a crime reduction strategy in which carefully selected offenders receive concentrated law enforcement attention and simultaneously offers of concentrated social services through direct, persuasive communication and rigorous follow-up of those commitments. And we're going to talk a lot about the follow-up, which is, I feel, a key component. And that definition was taken from the recent guide that Mike Scott just put out through BJA and CNA, the Smart Policing Initiative Guide, titled Focused Deterrence of High-Risk Individuals. So I recently attended the Evidence-Based Policing Symposium out at George Mason in June of this year. And it was really interesting sitting in the crowd. The conference was put on primarily by academics in the police research field, professors from all over the country. But it was interesting hearing the word focused deterrence repeated over and over as a tactic that worked. Mentioned by Dr. Charlotte Gill, by Dr. Cody Pella from Arizona State, Dr. Lum and Dr. Coper from George Mason recently developed a playbook for officers talking about crime reduction and things that work. And again, focused deterrence is repeatedly referred to in their booklet as well. So our focus in Madison were the most violent offenders in the city. There's a number of ways that you can target focused deterrence, and we'll talk about that shortly. We decided at the time that our problem was gun violence, so that's what we were going to go after at the time. So our primary goals at that time were to reduce criminal recidivism in the group of targeted people, reduce the number of people being victimized by that particular group of people, and with that specific group, we want to take away all of their excuses for committing any kind of crime. Because those of you who have been in a courtroom know that the defense attorney or the defendant have a million excuses as to why the crime was committed, going back to how they were raised, drug issues, alcohol issues, job issues, you name it, and they will bring it up. So we wanted to basically eliminate everyone's excuses. And then frankly, at the end of this whole thing, we want people to become good members of our community, to become loving family members, and to become fantastic parents to kids. And frankly, In Madison, one of our biggest problems here is the family structure and the fact that many of the kids are growing up in broken homes, leading to a whole host of issues, which later leads them to grow up and make poor decisions involving guns and drugs. So our current staffing of our Special Investigations Unit, and this is where Focused Deterrence falls, is under our Special Investigations Unit. There is a captain that oversees investigative services. There's a number of units in investigative services. The captain isn't strictly assigned to Focused Deterrence, but he's assigned to, or I'm sorry, she currently is assigned to the umbrella group. There is a lieutenant under the captain, of course, and there are 2 detectives primarily assigned to the unit, and their only job is the Focused Deterrence mission. We have 1 intelligence officer who's a police officer position who helps with bulletins and intelligence gathering on the offenders. And then we have 2 probation parole agents through the Department of Corrections who are also assigned, and their only caseload are the offenders who are in the Focused Deterrence program. So our detectives work very closely on a daily basis with these 2 probation parole agents. And I have to give a lot of credit to DOC for going on a limb and committing a lot of resources to us. They are a fantastic partner with us. So one of the biggest pieces of this whole puzzle is our resource providers. We initially called them our Community Against Violence group. And you'll see here, we tried to get as many groups as we could involve, and there were a lot of groups out there trying to do the right thing with offenders, trying to do some mentorship, trying to get people's lives back on track. However, we found that a lot of them weren't talking to each other. A lot of these groups were kind of working in silos in the community with little to no communication. So frankly, it was a difficult job for those of us starting the unit to try to draw everyone together and to try to figure out who needed to be drawn together and who provided what resource. So we did get, as you can see the list here, United Way, Urban League, Urban Ministry, some programs with offenders, ex-offenders, Vision Behind Bars. We had Central Hispano, we had Joint Forces for Family, the Job Center, the YWCA. But again, that was difficult. It was difficult in the fact that it was, we didn't have money to pay for a coordinator position. And that's really what initially, early on, is that what we were lacking was a coordinator to pull all those groups together. So it kind of fell in the police's, our department's hands to do some of that. And it really shouldn't, frankly, that should be a completely separate entity as the resource provider. So currently, DOC, our Department of Corrections, has stepped up, and they are providing a coordinator who coordinates resources for this specialized group of guys. And I say guys because I think there's only 1 or 2 women in our group of 120 now. So pulling levers, that's what this is all about. So in our official notification, they're basically given a hard message and a soft message. And the warning from a hard law enforcement message is that every available legal lever will be pulled if your criminal behavior continues. And there's a promise made by the prosecutors and by law enforcement that we will bring immediate, swift, and a severe response to anyone who sits here in this meeting, listens to this message, and then decides to go out and reoffend. Frankly, it's kind of a shock and awe type of message. We want people to be shocked. We've had people start crying in the meetings. It is a great shock value, and we'll get into it later, but when the chief of police stands 10 feet in front of you and looks you in the eye and tells you, he knows exactly who you are and that you better not commit any crimes. After the law enforcement panel, we bring in a soft message to our notified group of guys. And that soft message is given by, again, that group of resource providers, advising them that, hey, you heard a hard message, but we're here to give you a softer message. We're here to provide you resources. We want to see you succeed in this community. We are here to provide job training. We're here to provide driver's license, HSED, housing, drug and alcohol issues to help you with virtually anything you need help with we will help you with. And basically what this meeting does is it strips away the anonymity of these people. And we all know that criminals like to commit crimes and they feel comfortable committing crimes because they think they're anonymous half the time. But when you strip away that layer of anonymity and you're called out and your behavior is called out, it really, really means something. So the focus deterrence itself, it can be used in a whole variety of ways. Cities have used it for gangs, for guns, for drugs. You know, High Point did the drug market initiative, as people are aware of years ago. We have settled on violence. High Point is also currently doing domestics. Chula Vista is doing domestics with, I believe, with significant success. And then I have used it in internal affairs when I was in there. Again, on a theory that a small number of officers in a larger department typically are the ones generating a large volume of complaints. So if we can provide resources to that small number of officers, I felt that we could get our complaint numbers down. Typically, we see officers going through some personal struggles, and frankly, those struggles typically are alcohol-related or they are relationship-related. So we kind of had a little call-in meeting with some of our officers. We would have the district commander come in, and the district commander would be the person that gave the message, the caring message, that, hey, we've invested a lot in you. We don't want to see you go down the path of termination. We're here to provide you resources and try to get you whatever counseling you need to have. The commander of the internal affairs unit, who was me at the time, kind of provided the hard message, and I showed them their complaint histories, because a lot of people aren't aware of their complaint histories. I showed them complaint histories. I explained to them, hey, look, you are on a path to self-destruction unless you end it now. And then we had a union representative that would help provide the individual's resources. We would leave the room, and that union person would have a one-on-one with our officers to try to see what they could do. So the history, again, I'll go over it. A small number of people are responsible for a large amount of your violence in your city, same as your streets in the city. I believe Dr. Lum has had some recent research saying that approximately 7% of the streets in the city are responsible for 60+% of the crime that occurs in the city. It's the same thing for your offenders. You know, your 10% of your people in your city are responsible for probably 80% of your violence. So we hold people accountable, we provide them support, and again, stripping away the anonymity. Our philosophy, as you can see, it kind of all melds together in the middle. We try to work together with community services, with the moral voice of the community saying that we won't tolerate this type of behavior anymore, and law enforcement. And we come together in conjunction with each other, and that makes us all much more powerful when we can work together. So our referral process, how do we go about identifying people? Is we ask our patrol officers, our neighborhood officers, detectives, federal agents, outside agencies, probation, parole. We ask our community members, everyone, to give us the names of people who are driving crime in the community, who are causing problems now. So as we got that list, we went through it, and we developed some criteria with the DA's office on where to draw a line, because the line has to be drawn somewhere in the sand. So initially, we've decided that a candidate has to have 2 or more felony convictions, with at least 1 felony conviction for a violent offense. Again, most of these people have many more than 2 violent felonies. And really, when I say we are selecting them, they have actually selected themselves. Through their previous criminal history, they've self-selected for this program. And again, if you're starting a program, you can make these standards anything you want to make them, and just make sure that your DA's office is on board with that. We decided that they must be on probation, just like High Point at the time gave us that recommendation, because that's a lever that we used to get them into the meeting. If they weren't on probation and we asked them to come to a meeting with a bunch of cops and a bunch of resource providers, do you really think they're going to come? Maybe, maybe not. But this way, with the probation requirement that they come to the meeting, they're required by their agent to attend. So after we get these referrals, we begin an intensive background of their criminal history. We look at all the charges that they had been charged with. We look at the charges that were dropped, the charges that were pled down. We looked at the number of people that were victimized by these individuals and their relationships. Were they victimizing absolute strangers off the street? Were they victimizing intimate partners? Were they victimizing women in particular? You know, that's an important thing to look at as well. And then we basically took the cream of the crop. So I think initially we had about 200 people referred to us when we first started the program, and we narrowed it down to 20 simply based on number of violent felony convictions. So the guys with 10 or 12 violent felony convictions rose to the top, and the ones with 2 or 3 felony convictions kind of sank to the bottom. So we took that top tier of individuals. And with the top tier of individuals, we completed an intensive background summary on them. So each detective, at the time I think we had 3 detectives in there when we first started, so each detective took a group of people and began looking at criminal complaints, dissecting criminal complaints, again, what happened in the case, and we wrote up documents using police reports, arrest summaries, and DOC records, combining all the information we possibly could on the individual. So I'll talk briefly here about, after these packets were made up on each individual, the photograph that you see here was removed. The name was removed. I believe the date of birth was removed, and they just became a number. So we had a committee, a blind process committee, in which we used a representative from the DA's office, from the U.S. Attorney's office. We had 4 to 5 members of our CAV group, our Community Against Violence group, that participated, as well as the regional chief of the Department of Corrections. We had an ATF representative, and then we had one of our captains as a representative, who formed a committee to do the actual selection process. So again, each of these packets were made up on these individuals, and we decided at the time that we would notify 10 people. And you ask why we notified 10 people. It's because we went to our service providers, resource providers, and said, what can you legitimately handle at this point in time, and provide them high-quality resources and prioritize these guys. And we were told by our group that we were going to start with 10 and see how it went. So we decided to double that number and send 20 people to the selection committee and have the selection committee pick who they thought were the top 10. So again, if you do something like this, I'd recommend that you at least double the number that you send your selection committee. We initially included gang affiliation. However, I would recommend perhaps not including that in the future. I'll get into the reason why, more reasons why later, but there's not a lot of white people, honestly, that are involved in the Black Disciples. So that does lead itself to kind of guessing on race of people. And frankly, there's not a lot of African Americans that are belonging to the Hells Angels, so we wanted to kind of leave that out, and I'd recommend you leave that out. Let's see here. I would, when we initially selected our top 10, we actually had some alternates, so we'd select 2 or 3 alternate people, because invariably, during the time that the selection was held and that the notification was held, and we tried to keep those pretty close to each other. They were within a week or 2 of each other, but invariably that someone would get locked up, or a couple of guys would get locked up during that time period, and they wouldn't be available for an in-person notification. So notification itself, this is your shock and your awe. We had it at a neutral location. I would recommend avoid having it at a law enforcement facility. We had it at a United Way, but you can have it at a church. I think we're currently doing it at a job center. Have it near a bus line so that people without cars don't come up with a reason why they can't get there. Make sure that they're near somewhere where they can get to. And currently what we're doing is that the probation agent delivers a letter to them kind of explaining the program to them, advising them the time and date, location, and the fact that they are required to attend. So as you can see from this picture, this is tight. This is personal. Our offenders are sitting on the left there, and you can see the guy in the blue shirt on your left. Right on the other side of him are the group of offenders, and on the right-hand side behind the table is our law enforcement panel. So this isn't speaking to a crowd of hundreds. This is kind of a one-on-one kind of deal, people looking each other in the eye and basically calling people out. One thing I would recommend at a meeting such as this, that you do have some safety officers. We do use some of our gang unit officers in plain clothes to come in just to be there to monitor. The probation agents do wand the offenders when they come in to make sure that they aren't armed. If they show up intoxicated or under the influence, they are placed under arrest on a probation violation and taken to jail. And then we end up doing a follow-up with them in the jail where they're made to watch the video of this event. And then they're talked to with the prosecutor, with the law enforcement officer, and with the resource provider. But frankly, it doesn't, I don't think it has the shock and awe value when they're getting it in the jail. So here is our seating panel. And Tom Woodmansey at the time did a lot of this. But we did have our our criminal investigation group. Our sheriff was present. The head of the DEA at the time, the head of the marshal's office at the time, the head of DOC at the time, the head of the elected DA, our chief, the appointed U.S. attorney, the head of U.S. probation, the head of the ATF office, FBI office, IRS office, the city attorney's office, and then we had a suburban agency representative who kind of represented all of the agencies. So that's a lot of people present, frankly. You can have that many if you want. You may want to trim that number down a little bit. We tried to keep the notification session itself to a maximum of 1 hour. You ask why is that? Because frankly, people's attention, an hour, we're pushing it at an hour. You're not going to keep people's attention over an hour, certainly. We had a coordinator, and Tom kind of was the coordinator at the time who kept people on task. So we asked each law enforcement agency to give a short 2 to 3 minute presentation on their agency, what they do, what they're responsible for, ending with a very consistent message. And that message is that we want to see you guys succeed. We want you to become productive members of our community. However, if you choose to reoffend, then we're going to work together as a group and do everything in our absolute power to ensure that you're locked up for as long as possible. So every law enforcement agency was real consistent in that message, and that we will work together, and that we will clear our desks off and make you the #1 priority. And then the resource provider group came in. I don't have the seating chart for that, but the law enforcement panel left, the resource panel came in and gave a very similar message as I described. They would describe what agency they represent, what services they can provide, and that they'd actually provide sign-up sheets then and there. And then after the notification ended, we would have a little pizza and soda, and people would kind of mingle around and talk. The people selected would be able to sign up for programming right then and there if they wanted to. Some people were upset. Some people didn't want anything to do with this. They stormed out, which was fine. They could leave. But then we were sure to follow them up a week or two later with law enforcement and probation parole to, again, go over the meeting, because some of these guys are going to be in shock and they aren't going to fully understand what this meeting was about. So it's important to do some follow-up with the PO and with law enforcement to explain, look, this isn't a bad thing. This is actually a good thing that you were selected, because you are going to get priority over everyone else in this city for resources. So if you say you need drug and alcohol treatment, you're going to be pushed right to the top of the list, and you're going to get it immediately. If you need a job, again, pushed to the top of the list, you're going to get it immediately. So a lot of people thought that this was a horrible thing to be in, and we tried to explain to them, it's only horrible if you decide to reoffend. You reoffend, you're right, you are going to get extra attention. You are going to get, the DA is not going to plead everything out. But if you decide to go straight and get on the path to being a productive community member, it's a fantastic opportunity. So we got a lot of positive press. We still get positive press for the most part. Of course, when you start a unit like this, the press is very interested, and then the interest wanes after a while. But lots of good stuff for Madison, for our community. They were happy that we were looking at things in a different light and just not interested in strictly locking people up all the time, as they thought is our job. They were actually interested in a little bit of rehabilitation. So as far as the follow-up after an actual notification, again, our 2 detectives and our agents, probation agents, are responsible for that. They don't have any other cases on their plate other than the follow-up with the offenders. And SIU, for those of you who don't know, that's the Special Investigations Unit. That's the group that does our follow-ups. And this, frankly, to me is most important. Some departments really don't do a lot of follow-up. They just notify the people and then wait for them to reoffend. They do provide the resources, but then, if they reoffend, then the officer gets involved. We decided it was best here in Madison that we do a lot of follow-through. And again, it takes a special officer, and not every officer is going to be interested in this. You do have to have an officer that is a little social worky, frankly, and that is willing to do a little hand-holding on occasion. So we do home visits with P&P on a monthly basis where we follow up with families, with employers, with the offenders, obviously. But the detectives and the agents are talking on a daily basis. They just try to get to their homes at least once a month. Doing a lot of checking in, verifying the information was accurate on who they're living with, if they're really living at the addresses they claim they're living at. And then they are still currently doing monthly resource meetings. The name of our community resource group has changed. Now they're calling it the Madison Area Resource Committee, the MARC Committee. So law enforcement, probation pro, and the resource providers do get together once a month, and they go over each person that's requesting resources. And it's really improved a lot, I have to say, since when we started, since we have somebody coordinating the program with DOC. They will bring up a name of a person, and if that person needs a job, they'll figure out who is to be responsible for the job training or getting them signed up. If they need, again, whatever resource they need, if they need housing. Housing seems to be a big one. Someone is definitely appointed to do that with follow-up. I will say that with mental health, a lot of these guys are going to suffer some mental health issues. We tried to stay away from the chronically mentally ill because part of this program is that they have to have the capability to make a rational decision and understand right from wrong. A chronically mentally ill person may not be able to make those decisions. So we tried to shy away from the chronically mentally ill. There's a lot of resources out there for them. But I would suggest some kind of component, mental health component in your program to help out. And then as some of them do reoffend, and as they reoffend, the detectives are responsible, working with the district in which their reoffense occurred, and doing the follow-up. And the nice thing is that our detectives assigned to this unit don't follow up on district cases for the most part, so they are free to do more of the in-depth investigations, spending time on the phone, listening to jail phone calls, and that kind of thing, which again, sometimes they're worth their weight in gold and they can make and break the case. It's just that most detectives half the time don't have time, frankly, to listen to jail phone calls. Deconfliction is quite important, we found. This group that you're going to notify is a group of people that's going to attract a lot of law enforcement attention. Whether it's guns, drugs, robbery unit, there's probably a lot of people looking at these guys. So it's important to use whatever database you have available to you to ensure that we don't have different agencies investigating the same guy, and to coordinate your resources on investigation. We have something called a sentry notification that we ran through our CID, our state online justice portal. So we were able to flag our guys. So anytime they're run in the state, we would get a notification that a certain agency had ran them, and then our detectives would follow up on, when they were run, why they were run, what the circumstances were, if they committed a crime in another agency. However, I will say a lot of those cases, they were just near hits. So many times the detectives were tracking down guys that weren't actually our clients in our program. And then once that was realized, we didn't deal with that anymore. A couple of guys I want to mention. The first guy on the left, both these guys had problems with women. First guy on the left, Amon Hollins, loved to beat up women. That was his thing for whatever reason. And typically in Dane County, I shouldn't say typically, in Wisconsin, domestic battery is a misdemeanor. It's not a felony crime. So he had a lot of misdemeanors on his plate. He kept beating up girlfriends and other women in his life. Never quite seemed to go to prison for very long. He'd go to jail for a little while and get probation for a little while, and he had a bunch of stuff hanging over his head when he was notified. So after his notification, he decided to go and do the same thing and beat up one of the girlfriends pretty badly. Finally got charged with felony. And then with all the things hanging over his head and the fact that he had been through a notification, we played the video of our notification to the judge and explained everything that old Amon was offered that he decided to not take advantage of. The judge ended up sentencing him to 13 years in prison, which is frankly unheard of in Dane County for a domestic battery type of case. The guy on the right, Eric Alston, same kind of deal. He liked to batter women. Again, the same thing. He would do short jail stints. He had a lot of charges plea bargained down. A lot of charges dropped because he convinced women to not testify against him. He was notified. He again went and beat up a girlfriend. He ended up getting the girlfriend to lie in court for him. He ended up getting one of the kids who were present during this thing to lie for him. And it was real apparent in the courtroom that the child and the woman were lying for him. And then again, we showed him the sentencing. We showed the sentencing judge the video of the notification. We had documented all the meetings that took place with Eric and everything else over the time that he had been notified, all the resources that had been offered to him. And the judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison. So again, they made that choice. I wouldn't say it's a success or a failure. To us, it's a success in the fact that they are no longer victimizing people. They made that conscious decision to go and reoffend after they were told not to. So our notification stats, pre-notification, as of 2016, that's when I was in the unit, we had 3,048 total charges against 109 offenders. Of that, we had 604 felony convictions, 928 misdemeanor convictions, and 980 people had been victimized by this group of 109 people. Pretty staggering stats. And I want you to look at after notification stats, and I hope that the number 2 jumps out quickly at you. So we didn't have money to bring in statisticians and researchers to do a bunch of crime stats on if crime went up or down. We were just strictly looking at our group of offenders in our limited capacity as officers. So pre-notification, 74% of the people that we had notified were involved with gun-related crimes. These were the worst guys in Madison. After notification, only 2 of them have picked up a gun and been convicted of it. There may have been more that picked one up that we haven't caught, but only 2 of them have gun-related convictions, which to us is fantastic. They have continued to commit some smaller level thefts. Some thefts, some retail thefts. There has been obviously some domestic stuff going on with some of them. So there's still some victims out there. There's a total of 40 victims since notification of the 109 guys. So not each of the 109 have victimized someone. Some of them have done it repeatedly to people. But again, considering the fact that they had 980 prior to notification and 40 after notification, to us that's a success. Custom notifications is something that we do dabble with. So of our group of 20 that we start with, we're looking at people driving crime now, as we mentioned before. But then there's going to be half that group that you send to the selection committee isn't going to be selected. So of that half that group, we will send detectives to the home, give them a letter notifying them that, hey, you've been referred to the Special Investigations Unit as a person driving crime in our community. It needs to end now. And if you don't end your behavior, you will be at the top of the list for the next notification. So we do visit them in home by a detective, a prosecutor, and one of our resource representatives. You know, we did this, something very similar to this. We had a problem with some of the Latino gangs in town, and back about 20 years ago, they were warring back and forth, a lot of violence between them. And we took one of the prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We took an ATF agent, a gang detective at the time, and then myself, and we met with the two leaders of both the warring factions. We met them in their homes with their families, and sat down with them and said, hey, you know, we know what's up. We know what you're responsible for. And the U.S. Attorney and the ATF agent went through federal gun laws and what's going to happen to them the next time a gun is picked up. And the fact that if anybody in your gang picks up a gun, that the heat's coming down on all of you. We'll do everything we can to lock up every one of you. So after we had that meeting, it was silence for 10 months, or almost a year, I believe. There wasn't a peep, there wasn't a battery, there wasn't a robbery, there wasn't a broken window between them. So that was a value to us. I mean, it slowly kind of crept back into things, and one of the gangs kind of disappeared more or less, they aged out. But it works. Some comments from some judges that we've had. Some support it, some may not support it. You have to educate your judges in starting a program like this. Explain to them what your program is all about. Explain the resource provider connection. So here's one judge, Stephen Elke, who used to be a federal prosecutor, went on to become a judge. He says this is evidence-based policing, which it is. I watched the video where you were offered services and you chose not to accept them. He was the one that sentenced that one guy to 13 years that I discussed. Another judge in town who sentenced the second guy I discussed. You and your attorney have portrayed the Special Investigations Unit as a bully, and they're going after you. Well, maybe you need to be bullied, because I look at all of the victims you created and see that you are the one who's the bully. Defense attorneys don't like it. You know why they don't like it? They don't like it because we typically will send up only airtight cases. There isn't a whole lot of defense attorney can argue against or try to get suppressed in these cases, because we have detectives that have the time to spend extra time on these special guys. So the defense attorney here says we're putting the fear of God into these defendants. Jail call intercepts. We talked about that before and how the detectives, and I was a detective when I first came into the unit. I had time to listen to jail calls, which was fantastic. And again, they're worth their weight in gold if you had time to do it. So one guy was the victim of a drug rip while he was locked up. First he was in for a probation violation or something, and someone went and ripped his crib. So even if he thought he couldn't do anything about it because I'm in this program. Another guy who was locked up had his girlfriend tied up with duct tape and robbed at gunpoint while she was home alone because he was locked up in jail. And he said, I would have shot that motherfucker that robbed my girlfriend if I wasn't an SIU. So they understand the implications, some of them I should say, understand the implications of being in this program. Another client says they're following me, they're on point. Another client says, I dream about you, you're in my dreams. And criminals typically are a little paranoid, and I don't think a little paranoia hurts us. I think it's okay if people think that maybe we're spending a little more time than we really are following them. Maybe they mind their P's and Q's a little more. I'm not sure if it's all that bad. Here's one of our success stories. Jesse Payton, long history of armed robbery and violent domestics. You know, since he was notified, he's had 0 police contact. He's had no victims. He's got a full-time job. He's got an apartment. And I think he's gotten some custody of his 12-year-old daughter now. He came back to be a mentor for our program. and this is the guy that's going to make a difference to your new guys coming to your program, seeing that it's not all bad, that there's a lot of positives to this program. And I just want to mention, I think in the law enforcement, I don't know how many of you out there are law enforcement, but I think in a law enforcement officer's career, you kind of go through phases. And I went through this when I was a young officer. All I wanted to do was drive fast and kick open doors and seize drugs and guns and lock people up. And then you get all these people locked up that you're after, and then after 5, 10 years, you start seeing all these people filtering back out of prison, and you see them doing the same thing. And you start scratching your head saying, what the heck, I just locked those guys up 5, 10 years ago. Why aren't they rehabilitated? Why haven't they changed? And then a few years later, you start seeing their kids coming up. You start seeing their kids following in their parents' footsteps. Criminal behavior, drugs, guns, et cetera, et cetera. So you start reaching the point where you realize that just arresting these guys is not working. Nationally, we can show that arresting them and throwing them in jail simply isn't rehabilitating most of them. So it's now time to start looking at programs that offer something else. And I think this is a great program that offers that extra resource for people, an alternative for the ones who want to go straight. So things to consider if you're going to start up a program similar to this. The chief has to buy into it. Without the chief's support, this is never going to happen in an department. Thankfully, we had Chief Ray's support at the time, and he basically, came down and said this will happen in this department. It will be a departmental priority. You're not going to get everybody in your department to agree with this concept. I've noticed in other places I've been in and here as well that some of the older officers have a hard time believing in this, but you will get a lot of younger officers perhaps to buy into it. Your Gen X people, your millennials, they're the ones that want to make a difference in their communities. They want to have an impact on society. This is one way to do it. Don't go under thinking you're going to have everything figured out, because you're not. You're going to run into obstacles. You're going to have to roll for punches. It's going to take time to build trust, and we fought that because the resource groups you're going to work with are typically people we're not used to working with. We don't speak the same language. There isn't a lot of trust there, so it does take a lot of time. There's some infighting, as we discussed earlier, as far as the resource groups and who's going to lead the resource groups, because a lot of times they don't have a natural leader or coordinator, so that's why it's important to try to get a coordinator involved. We noticed some issues with some of our resource mentor-type people, ex-offenders playing both sides of the fence. We caught one guy on a jail tape telling an offender that he had went to the girlfriend who he had just battered and tried to get her to not file charges against him. So then we went to the woman who the offender had battered, and sure enough, this resource provider mentor guy that we thought was on our side actually wasn't, and he did go visit her and tried to get her to not press charges because he understood the repercussions of a notified offender having a domestic battery charge. He knew that this guy was going to go to prison if he got convicted. So be careful of what you give up to your resource providers. We will discuss with them cases, but we won't discuss details of cases. We kind of discuss them in general specifics in our monthly meetings, but the resource providers really are there to provide resources. They're not there to provide, to get details of the case. Faith-based organizations, they are in it, I hope, for the right reasons. We found that they aren't the ones with their hand out wanting money. They may be able to do this without money, and I suggest you try to do this without money initially. If you end up getting grants and that kind of thing later, that's fantastic, but we didn't have that at the time. Again, you have to sell this. You have to sell this to the judges, to the prosecutors, to everybody involved in this whole chain. Sell, and the reasons why. I know I'm running late. I'm going to try to hurry up here. What I recommend is you go and find a Reverend Jim Sumney. And Reverend Sumney is High Point's resource coordinator. I spent a day with that guy, and he is literally amazing. He spent all day knocking on doors, visiting clients, visiting families, knocking on doors of businesses, trying to find jobs for his guys. That is why High Point works, is Reverend Sumney. Try to find your own Reverend Sumney. A few more things to consider is passion. You need people who are passionate like Sumney. Passion will equal success for your program. Look for people within your agency who have some interest or passion in this. It's not going to succeed if you go to somebody and tell them, guess what, you're going to be the next focused deterrence person. It's simply not going to work. Throw this idea out there. Tell people to research it. Tell people to read the book, David Kennedy's book, Don't Shoot. Find some people that have some interest in it. Be flexible. Be able to evolve and change with the times. You have to communicate regularly, as we discussed. Don't overtax your resource providers. Make sure that they tell you how many people they can handle at one time, and then from there you decide how many people you're going to notify. We only do 2 notifications a year here of 10 people apiece, and that seems to work for our department. You may want to do more or less. Big thing, don't cry wolf to the DA or U.S. Attorney's Office. These are criminals. These are habitual criminals. They aren't going to go completely immediately straight right after notification. They're still going to smoke dope. They're still going to do a retail theft here and there. So on the small stuff, they're treated the same as everybody else in the criminal justice system. We're not going to run to the DA every time somebody gets arrested for possession of marijuana and say, guess what? The guy that was notified just got caught for possession of marijuana. We want the hammer. Not going to happen, and they're going to start turning a blind eye to you as you come in the door. The only time we go to them and ask for an actual hammer is when a crime of violence has occurred, they're involved in gun crimes or drug crimes. So limit the number of times you're asking for special treatment. Document all your contacts with your people, because that's going to come up later in sentencing. You're going to provide a Excel spreadsheet of every time you visited with an offender and everything that was offered. You want to make sure that you flag these individuals in CIB or your NCIC Pro, whatever you have in your state, to make sure that an officer isn't behind somebody late at night making a traffic stop on a notified person who might have a gun in the car. These guys now have a lot to lose. You have just elevated the bar after notification. That if you get caught with a gun or drugs on you, you're going away for a long time. So, frankly, that may make people act a little differently if they did have a gun on them. So you want to make sure that your plates are flagged in your databases, your names are flagged in your databases, and this is real publicly known with your officers on who these guys are. We discussed career criminals. Mentorship is huge, and that's something that we still struggle with to this day, is finding mentors for these guys. Good luck with that to you. Do a lot of research on who your mentors are. Let's see, biggest challenges with pulling together resources, selling it to our officers, and how are you going to measure success, and we decided to look at victimization rates to measure our success. Be willing to be flexible. We initially started out with our most violent offenders, but frankly, some of those guys are an older group of people who have developed a significant criminal history over the years. Since I've been out of the unit, they have changed and started targeting younger people, but therefore they also had to change the requirements. So now we have a requirement of 1 violent felony gun-related crime is the minimum standard to be even considered for this group of people. So be flexible. Figure out what's best for your city. Take bits and pieces from each one. This is only one way of doing something. There are tons of different ways to do this. BGA, CNA, and Mike Scott just put out this guide that I mentioned before, Focused Deterrence of High-Risk Individuals. Great read, but again, each city has different priorities, different dynamics. Here's a list of cities involved in some kind of focused deterrence projects, different kinds of projects, but they all have be great resources to check into. Some have been evaluated formally, some not. But I think most of them I noticed in that guide had a significant reduction in crime with whatever they were targeting. Our U.S. Attorney, John Vaudreuil, he was our U.S. Attorney under President Obama. He is currently not. But he had started a program. He was one of our biggest supporters. He was delivering letters to people in prison who qualified for 3 strikes, explaining the federal consequences if they get out and pick up a gun. So he is, again, a very strong partner. It's important to develop those relationships with the federal agencies as well. 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, I'm going to mention real quickly here. Eric Alston, one of the guys that I mentioned earlier, got 13 years in prison. He did file a lawsuit against us, a federal lawsuit, claiming we violated his right to equal protection and due process. He said he's a victim of discrimination and racial profiling because of the way that we selected him. He said his reputation was harmed by being labeled as one of our most violent criminals. Coincidentally, he had had 80 criminal charges filed against him in his life and was eventually convicted of 9 felonies and 17 misdemeanors. So he was one of our more significant criminals. So that lawsuit was filed back in 2012. It went all the way up until this spring. It was eventually heard by the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, who eventually ruled in our favor and did agree with our blind selection process. So that has been vetted through the 7th Circuit. Questions. John Vaudreuil, my email's on top. John Vaudreuil was our federal prosecutor. If anybody's interested in a prosecutor's opinion on this, he'd be a fantastic person to contact. That is really all I have. I guess I can take questions if there's any questions.
Great. Thanks, Cory. I'm going to go ahead and read through some of after the Q&A. We'll get through as many as we can in the next 5 minutes. So let me see if I can scroll to the top here.
I apologize for going longer than I thought.
No, that's be fine. All right, so let me kind of scroll. So was the program citywide or targeted to specific patrol districts and or neighborhoods?
Citywide.
Sorry. Scroll feature isn't working right now, but okay. What if the judges are not on board for maximum sentencing because they want to remain neutral?
You can only control what you can control, and we didn't lose. Unfortunately, we didn't waste a lot of time. That's just part of life. Most of our judges that were on board, I can't say they all are, because we have had judges that treat the people the same as they treat everybody else, even though they've been through the process. So again, you can maybe make that information public. That look, here's a frequent offender, and here's their criminal history, and here's their package of what they've done in the past. Yet they still got probation on this case. You know, is that fair? I don't know. So you can't control the judges what they're going to do.
What kind of results did you see when you applied focused deterrence to internal affairs?
I only did it on a couple of people. It seemed to be successful on the couple of people I did it with. They were both undergoing some personal issues, and once we got to the resources, the complaints ended. I'd like to see it tried on a bigger scale. I mean, our departments, we have 460 officers, so we're not a huge department. I think it would work perhaps on a bigger scale when you have the bigger problems.
Has racial disparity between the offenders and law enforcement panel been explored?
There are racial disparity issues. Probably 80% or more of our offenders are African American, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is. As I said before, they have self-selected themselves for the program. We looked at everyone who was referred to us and simply took them the highest number of felony violent convictions, and it is what it is.
How long does the program run for the 10 offenders chosen, and how often does the selection meet and choose offenders?
So they meet twice a year. They select 10 offenders twice a year. I will say that we did take almost a year off when it was going through the Court of Appeals in the 7th Circuit, just because we didn't want to do something that may have been in case the court ruled against us. So since the court has ruled in our favor, we've continued on again. So it's twice a year, 10 offenders. We've recently decided to start phasing people out. So if they go 3 years without any police contact or violations, they're more or less phased out of the intensive visits and that kind of thing by their detectives.
Okay. I'll probably take 2 more questions. Regarding the 2 examples you used for repeat offenders involving domestic violence, what precautions were taken in regard to ensuring victim safety?
Victim safety is something that we could. You mean? I guess I'm not sure on the question. You mean after the offense or prior to? Prior to the actual batteries, I think one was a woman that we had no idea who she was. It was just a girlfriend of one of the guys. I think the second one was a long-term girlfriend, and I think that she probably was invited to the notification. That's one thing I will mention is we encourage these guys to bring family members to notification, because frankly, the family members have a lot more power, persuasion over them than we do. The grandmas, the mothers, the wives, the girlfriend, whatever, the significant others. That's something that we could do a better job of, though, is providing some protection for victims. We had discussed providing a separate room with some domestic abuse resources. We never did that, but that's something you could certainly explore.
Okay, and this is the last question for today. So we had a program called Project SAFE in Salisbury, North Carolina between 2003 and 2009. It was successful. I'm a former police officer turned licensed professional counselor. How do I plug in to assist with a program like this?
You'd have to get your local agency to start a program like this, first of all. It's really got to be, you know, law enforcement led with resource providers. So if you're interested, you know, I would discuss calling your decision maker, if that's your chief or your sheriff or whoever it is, and having a conversation about these ideas. Like I said, this is being tried all over the country. This isn't anything new. Different agencies are doing it different ways, different techniques. So there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of experts out there, frankly, that can come in and help you start a program like this.
Okay. Great. Well, I know there's quite a few other questions in the queue, but if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Cory or John on the screen. Cory, thank you so much again for sharing information with us today. And
thank you for everyone. I appreciate your time, your hour.
Yep. All right. Thanks all. Have a good day.
Thank you.